You know, when it comes to alien abduction stories, I would have to say the Travis Walton abduction of 1975 has to stand out as being one of the most, not only documented cases, but it was the case to set the standard for all other abduction stories after, and gave us all an idea of what we would expect if this were to ever happen to any one of us.
Say what?
And it really opened up a lot of questions, not only for skeptics, but for believers as well.
Did you or any of your crew murder Travis Walton?
Absolutely not.
It looked like a fire.
How many people have seen the movie? Most of you. So probably most everyone realizes that they changed things quite a bit. But I'm working on getting the remake of the movie with the hope to, tell it more the way it really happened. It was just an ordinary work day. We'd been putting in some long days. We were trying to finish up the contract before the winter weather. We worked till almost dark, and a lot of people aren't aware that in Arizona we got quite a bit of forest, the largest ponderosa pine forest in the world. And so, we drove, maybe half an hour east or west from Snowflake to Heber, and then up into the mountains near the rim for the job. One of the highest points in Arizona, a lot of forest. You could, see San Francisco peaks, which clear over 100 miles from there. So the crew comprised of Michael Rogers, the crew boss, he was in the upper left there, Ken Peterson with the glasses, and Alan Dallas, the black sheep of the family. Lower left was Dwayne Smith. Couldn't get a hold of him, so he wasn't really included in the cast. As you might have noticed in the movie, there was only 6 in the crew. There was actually 7 of us. John Gillette in the center at the bottom there, and then Steve Pierce, the youngest guy on the crew. He was played by Henry Thomas, the little boy from the wee E.T., grown up, and it's me back then. And we all fit into a crew cab truck, a double cab truck, so 3 in the front, 4 in the back. We finished the day's work. We loaded up our equipment in the back, and we're headed out of there. In the movie, it gives the impression that we'd been driving for some time and we're getting drowsy, like it was a long drive. It was a long drive, but we hadn't gone very far before we noticed these glimmers of light. So everybody was still in a very alert state from having been working hard physically just moments before. And we saw this little glimmers of light. And of course, out in the woods, it's a very remote area. That's something out of the ordinary, but not at first real alarming. It was just kind of a curiosity at first, and then, the more it wasn't adding up. We were driving south up towards the rim, which is, the higher point, which is also, the rim road also borders the Apache reservation there. And the road was paralleling the back of this ridge, but it was kind of down off of the left side of the ridge. So the peak of the ridge was to our right, and as we were driving along, these little glimmers of light, I at first thought it was probably deer hunters. But then I realized that the source of the light was coming from higher than where the crest of the ridge would have been, in other words, above ground level. So that didn't add up.
What the hell is that?
And it wasn't like the whole crew immediately spotted the light. It was just all these little conversations among the group's people paired off talking, suddenly started, dropping out of sight real quickly, and so everybody was looking in the same direction. At first I was thinking the hunters, and then I thought, well, maybe there's a lightning strike, because the forest in that area has the highest number of lightning strikes of any place in the continental United States other than the Everglades. So we have quite a few hits, and we've even encountered that on the way to work before, where the tree's sitting there burning because it was recently hit by lightning. But it'd been clear, dry weather. We didn't have any stormy weather that would explain that. So I thought, well, perhaps a plane crashed. And I found out later one of the other crew members was kind of thinking the same thought. But, this little mental inner deliberation didn't go on too long, because you could see a break in the trees up ahead where the light was sort of shining across the road. There was pretty thick growth at the time. And I said, Mike, hurry up, get up there where we can see, So we got up there, and as soon as we got into where this light was shining across, we looked to our right, and there it was, hovering in plain sight. No mistaking this for the planet Jupiter, like our debunker there. That was one of his first theories, Unmistakable. Alan yelled out, "It's a flying saucer," because it was self-evident. Everybody knew what we were looking at. This was not some ball of light in the distance, and it wasn't so bright that we couldn't see the structure. It was incredible, the sight. John was saying here, he spoke with me recently. He was one of the crew members sitting in the back there. He was saying that to him, it was like some fantastic sports car, it was smooth as glass. It was metallic in parts of it, and parts of it were glowing, but not so brightly you couldn't see the whole thing. And I had the impression that it was just going to be gone real quickly, and that was what I was thinking when I threw open the door and started towards it. Alan Dallas, who said in an interview way back that it looked to him like I was being controlled, like I was in some kind of trance. And Steve says the same thing, but as far as my own perceptions are concerned, to me, I felt like I wasn't completely under my own control. I was just really curious and thinking that, the closer I could get to it before it got away, the more I might learn, just see it up close. There was a little bit of me kind of showing off for the crew, but, mainly I was just awestruck, looking up at this thing. It just had the most awe-inspiring, the power of it, The crew said that they could feel the vibration in the truck, but the closer I got, the more scared I became, and the more agitated the crew became, and they started yelling at me to get back in the truck. But I came to a point where there was a pile of logging debris, and I couldn't really get that much closer. So I was looking up at it at about like a 45-degree angle. And I stopped just short of the pile, and they were really screaming and swearing at me to get back in the truck. And so, I turned to look at them, and it suddenly got louder, and it started to move and rise up. And I was startled by that, so I jumped for cover. And the closest thing was this pile of logging debris. I got down behind a log that was sticking out there. I was in a crouch there, and I was thinking, I'm going to jump up and sprint back to the truck. And they were really, getting pretty intense with saying, "Let's go, get out of there." And when I raised up, as soon as I stood fully up, I just felt this numbing shock go through me. Dwayne Smith, one of the guys on the crew, he later became an electrician. To him, he said it sounded like electricity. But in the police file, one of the men was quoted in the report as saying that it looked like a long blue flame, and the others described it as looking like a beam. But it was extremely powerful, they said, and they said the most incredibly bright thing they'd seen in their life. It lit up the night brighter than day. And the light had just a weird sort of effect. But one comment they made later was that it seemed like something's about to happen. And I'm thinking now that there may have been a reason for that, not just the dangerousness of what I was doing, but they may have been sensing the buildup of some kind of an electrical or energy charge. Because I'm thinking that when I stood up, at that point, my head and chest were closest to the craft than they were at any other point. Plus, the increase in sound and the volume and the motion, suggests to me that it was getting ready to take off. And that extra energy output built up some kind of a field. So it wasn't like they were somehow inducing me to come close and then zap me and take me that way. I'm thinking more now, like I've accepted the term abduction, because that's what people call these things. But it's more like an ambulance call, more of a rescue mission, really. I made something bad happen, and they were in a position to make it right.
Take a look at yourself. Perfect integration of human will and alien technology. Our finest achievement.
If they'd left me laying there, perhaps in cardiac arrest, the best case scenario for the crew would be to pick me up and take me to Payson Hospital or the Shola Hospital, which would have been over an hour and way too late. If a person's in cardiac arrest, you've got 4 to 6 minutes before brain death begins. And so that's probably the reason I'm thinking now that I was returned. Taken. And the fact that I was returned at all, again, suggests, a less than malevolent motive on their part.
But remember, Nick, you were the one who came looking for me. So you might want to ask yourself, did I find what I was looking for?
I wasn't just dropped back in the woods where it happened, which I would have froze to death before I could get help. I was put back near town where I could get help.
Give this guy a chance. Mr. Walton, can you tell me what they look like? Can you tell me how many of them there were? Were you given food? Injection?
All right, that's enough, mister.
And Heber is not where I live, but it was the town nearest where it happened. And also, Heber is down in a canyon, a deep canyon, and there's some steep-sided rock walls out of there. So they were able to descend and deposit me on the edge of town where I could see, to go to where to go to get help. And yet they would not be visible from a distance at all. Whereas if I had been taken to Snowflake, which is in a big wide valley, if they had lowered and come down there, they would have been seen by hundreds of people, So that explains that to me. But the fact that I was returned whole and healthy, all of these things combined to make me think that, and this is, years of puzzling over what happened and why, and, I've only got myself to blame. But now, so the crew proceeded into town. They called the law enforcement. And when the sheriff and his men interviewed the men, they could tell something really terrible had happened. When the crew had gone back to see if they could rescue me, they were unable to find me. They did see the craft leaving, and they described all this to the sheriff. At one point, Mike, fell to his knees and was crying, and he's not ashamed to admit that. I'm not ashamed to admit how totally terrified I was. And Steve Pierce was still crying when they made it to the sheriff. So the sheriff and his men knew that something really terrible had happened, but they immediately became suspicious that there had been a fight and that I had been murdered, and so that they had just made up this cover story. And to explain for why I wasn't ever going to be seen again. But Steve has always been very, very upset that I reported that he was still crying when they went to the sheriff. And he was only 17, you know, and it's no reflection on him or how tough he is or anything, but he's really had issues with that. He's, you know, to the point of denying that it happened. Right after my first book came out, he came over to my house and he wanted to fight about it. And so to this day, he tries to minimize how frightened he was. He denies that, you know, he was yelling for the boss to take off, and now he's trying to deny that he was crying. But I'll take the sheriff's men's word for it, and the rest of the crew, that, you know, they were in a very traumatized state. But the sheriff and his men suspected him of murder, and this pressure on the men continued throughout the search. Now, in the movie, they didn't go back that night, but in reality, half the crew did go back with the sheriff and his men. And so that, again, I give those guys credit for doing that, because, you know, they didn't know what they were up against and what they might run into. And, you know, the fact that the sheriff's men were armed was not that much help, you know. This was a very powerful thing. And so they went back and were unable to find anything that night. But there was a massive manhunt. You know, the sheriff organized a search, over 50 men on horseback, on foot, four-wheel drives. They had airplanes crisscrossing the area, helicopters, tracking dogs. You know, it was pretty extensive, and they were unable to find anything. The tracking dogs were unable to find any scent outside the clearing. You know, it just went from the edge of the road where I got out of the truck up to, you know, where I fell. And so, you know, some of the horses, they said, had behaved very strangely and bolted. So there was a lot of pressure in the community to try to explain it away. And so, you know, I think a lot of the locals were only too eager to believe that, yeah, well, this is murder or something else, you know, some kind of hallucination. You know, at the time that the crew passed the lie detector test, the president of the American Polygraph Association said that the odds were over 1,000,000 to 1 that there could be that many tests on a single issue and there being any kind of an error. Because, you know, everybody knows polygraphs isn't 100%, but when you have that many people, 6 people on a single issue, the odds were 1,000,000 to 1. Well, now there's over 16 tests passed in connection with this incident. So I don't know what the calculation on the odds of a mistake being, but, you know, I've passed 5 different tests from 3 different examiners, and the last one being just a couple of years ago, the last 2. But in the aftermath, even after the polygraph test, they just switched to other sorts of attacks. After I was hit, I regained consciousness pretty slowly. I was in and out for a while, and I didn't know where I was at first. I was disoriented, in a lot of pain, and I didn't know where I was. I thought, and then I remembered approaching the object, and I thought, well, you know, the crew probably, you know, I was hurt, and they took me in to get medical attention. I thought I was in some kind of a hospital. I was on some kind of an operating table or raised gurney. There was a light above me, and but, you know, because of the pain and the difficulty in breathing that I was having, I didn't want to move too much. I had this thing over my chest, and I didn't want to make it worse, and it did hurt more to move. So I was trying to hold still, but I could hear the sounds of movement around me, and my vision was really blurry, and it was even double vision for a while. But, you know, I came to, got a little more clear as time went on, like I said, in and out of consciousness. It's kind of like the pain itself would knock me out, but also the struggling to breathe. You know, when I could finally focus my eyes and I saw these creatures standing over me, I knew I was in no hospital. And so, you know, I just was instantly totally hysterical. And of course, this shot of adrenaline just gave me extra strength, and I rolled away from them. And this device that they had across my chest fell off, and I staggered back, and they were like coming around towards me immediately, which added to the panic. You know, it's dimly lit. I'm struggling to breathe. It's claustrophobic, low ceiling, very small. And I staggered back and I bumped up against a shelf, a little bench there. And I turned to look, and there was these instruments scattered out there. And so I just grabbed the biggest thing and started flailing at them. And so they stopped, suddenly turned, and I'm going to move along kind of quickly here because we're running short of time. Okay, thank you. And so I went looking for a way out and came to a room where there was some apparently doors, which I tried to open, operating some controls on the chair there. And that's when this human-looking being came in and led me out of there, and which I at first mistook to be just some kind of a rescue, where they were taking me, you know, out of this craft to another part of this larger building or larger craft, to where, you know, I thought I was finally away from these creatures. But then, you know, they wouldn't answer me, and so I really started to resist, and they put me down on this table, and I started to really fight. My panic gave me a little strength. I was able to pull one hand free and get it under the edge of this mask they put over my face, but I wasn't fast enough, and I lost consciousness. And next thing I know, I woke up outside of the town nearest where this happened. I recognized where I was, made my way down to the telephones there, and called my family. And so like I said, you know, there was just an onslaught of questions and accusations after I was returned. I was dealing with an incredibly difficult experience, you know, trying to handle this and the memories of what happened, my nightmares at night, and then all this stuff in the media was just, you know, secondary to me, but still, you know, very disconcerting. There was no place back then. There was very little to turn to, and so there was just all kinds of things, you know. And I had a whole battery of tests, EKG, EEG, you know, hypnosis, whole variety of things. And I document in great detail in my book the research that went on, and this whole litany of accusations that the debunkers came forward with just blew them out of the water. I was interviewed by Dr. Jalen Hynek, and he made a press conference the next day that you know, I was not hoaxing and had been falsely accused. And my nightmares, you know, stayed with me for a long time afterwards, and it was those eyes boring into me that were so difficult to deal with. And I'm thinking that it was because when they all came around there and we had that little standoff there where they were facing me, the three of them, I think, were trying to reassert control, and it wasn't working. And I think the reason it wasn't working is because when I was hit by the beam, that it caused a neurological disturbance that that prevented them from controlling me, even acting in unison, the three of them. And what supports that is the EEG, the brainwave scan that I had done, was done by a technician who did not know what had happened to me. All he knew that he was looking for some sign of injury. And there was a kind of an unusual pattern there that I'm going to look into as far as how that would be interpreted today and if that pattern still exists. But I thank you all for coming and for listening. I appreciate it.
This has been The Confidential Report. For even more stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to our channel today. And please show your support by clicking the like button on this video. For even more stories and news you deserve to know the truth about, follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for watching The Confidential Report.